Hey gang, I am Joe Edelman and welcome to The Last Frame Live, the longest running weekly photography live stream on YouTube. And if you're watching live, you probably know the drill. Please leave me a note in the chat. Let me know who you are and where you're watching from. And if you're watching the replay, no worries, you are still an important part of this community. Please leave a comment below the video so that I know you were here. Already live tonight. Who do we got here? We got Cooley from Indiana, Picture Effects from Hamburg, Germany, Calvin up in Maine, Scott in Arizona. I've got Robert down in New Mexico, Joe out in California, Jay in Colorado, David in San Diego. Let's see, Jeff in Maryland, Lynn in New York. Awesome. Great to have all of you, but we got a lot to cover tonight, so we're going to dive right in. All right, so last week was a pretty hectic news week. This week, fortunately, not so much. Now, at the end of last week's news, I did mention that I would talk about Nikon's announcement of the ZF. This retro-inspired camera combines really the iconic design of the old Nikon FM2 film camera, which, by the way, was a classic, but of course it adds in all of the modern technology as well as Nikon's Z series mirrorless lenses and technology from the cameras like the Z6 II, the Z8, and even a little bit of the technology from their Z9. Now, I'm not going to get into all the specs. I do have a link in the description below the video that will take you to Nikon's website with all of the details and especially the colors. Yes, 6 different colors to be exact. Orange camera, anybody? How about a green one? That's kind of what I thought, right? Look, my take, I want these camera companies to succeed, but I want to see them invest their efforts into research and development and new full-featured cameras. This is just my opinion, but the problem with this camera is it is a hybrid. It's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So it's not really full featured for still shooters and it's not fully featured for video shooters. So, let's keep it real. If Nikon's aiming at casual shooters, an iPhone honestly makes a lot more sense. I personally believe their research and development efforts would be better spent adding more features to their cameras to keep up with or stay ahead of the competition. Now, interestingly, I wrote that piece about that camera last week before the announcement came out, all about their new Bokeh-licious lens, which is the Nikon 135mm f1.8 S Plena. So this is the second named lens that Nikon has come out with in its Z mount line. And it does set a high bar for itself through the promise of dreamy bokeh, high resolution, edge-to-edge brightness, especially at wide open apertures, and incredible sharpness. For those of you that haven't kept up with this whole naming thing, their first named lens was the 58mm f0.95S Noct lens, which, by the way, you can pick up for a measly $7,996.95. And I know it's at 95 cents. It's going to be the deal breaker for a lot of people. But the new one is part of the S line of lenses. The 135 f1.8 was engineered with a focus on superior peripheral illumination, basically an emphasis on reducing vignetting and providing clear, bright distinction from edge to edge and corner to center. Admittedly, the images that they have on their website do show some really interesting, really kind of cool bokeh. So if that's your thing and you got the bucks, this lens will be available in mid-October for a slightly more reasonable price tag of basically $2,500. Okay? All right, so a social media update is the last of our news tonight. Threads, the Twitter or X knockoff, if you will, that was launched by Meta earlier this year, they have announced that by mid-December, you will finally be able to delete your Threads account without deleting your Instagram account that you used to set it up. In what was either an obnoxious move or simply a boneheaded oversight, the Threads platform was coded so that you signed up using your Instagram login. That made it easy. Problem is, once you did that, there was no way to delete your Threads account without deleting your Instagram account. Now, while Threads showed promise in the early days, already it has seen a 70% drop off in daily active users since its peak. In other words, if you like it, go for it. But do you need to be there if you're trying to market yourself as a photographer? No, definitely not. In fact, to make it even harder, Meta, the parent company, also has, of course, Facebook and Instagram. They have yet to release an API for Threads, which means that there is no way to tie it to popular social media tools like Buffer or Hootsuite or any of the posting tools that are commonly used by small business owners like photographers. Finally, in the news department tonight, I promised you some images with the new Apple iPhone Pro, and I'm going to make you wait until next week for them. The weather here, it's been horrible for the last week due to the tropical storm, and I have not had a chance to really put it through its paces outdoors in brighter lighting. So next week, we'll go ahead and we'll do an iPhone update. The little bit that I have had a chance to work with it, I will tell you, pretty impressive. All right, I've got 3 learning opportunities for you this week. Same ones as last week, so I'm going to go through them quick. Tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. This is like you're running out of time to register for this one, right? 7 p.m. Eastern time here in the US, I'm going to present a free virtual program about abstract photography. This is sponsored by Tamron and Murphy's Camera in Louisville and Lexington, Kentucky. Now, again, attending the presentation, it's free, but you have to register in advance. The link, it's in the description below the video. Everyone who attends this webinar will also receive a bonus Tamron rebate offer on select Tamron lenses, so don't miss out. Also, if you happen to be in the neighborhood of Williamsport, Pennsylvania, which is the home of Little League Baseball and the Little League World Series, next Saturday, October 7th, I'll be presenting 2 live in-person programs for the Susquehanna Valley Shutterbugs, Understanding Creativity and Correct Exposure for Digital Cameras. Both of these programs will be presented. The fee to attend, it's just $15. Registration is required in advance. The link also in the description below the video. And then the last of the 3, Tuesday, October 10th, I'll be presenting a program called Beautiful Portraits, the Psychology and Techniques. I talk about this all the time. 80% of photographing people, it's psychology. And by the way, I don't care what kind of people photographs you do. 20%, it's the art and science of photography. The cameras, the lenses, the lights, the modifiers, they're all the tools that we use. But these are not what makes a great beauty shot or portrait or people picture of any kind. Photographing people for any reason, it's a relationship game, and the gear has to take a backseat to the interaction between you and your subject. Okay? So this is a 2-hour live interactive program presented via Zoom. Cost to attend is $15. All attendees receive a digital download with my prep information for photo shoots, along with many of the tips that I share during the presentation. Your paid registration also gives you 72 hours after the program to watch and rewatch if you can't make it live. The link, it's in the description below the video. This week's quote is from Ernst Haas, who lived from 1921 to 1986. Haas was an Austrian-born but also American photojournalist and color photographer, widely recognized as a pioneer in color photography. He was also a member of the prestigious Magnum Photos agency. Haas is renowned for his innovative use of color in his photographs and his influential contributions to the field of photojournalism. The quote, whoops, it would help if I hit the right button. There we go. The limitations of photography are in yourself. For what we see is only what we are. Great words. Ernst Haas, creator of this quote, is a person that I admired greatly as a teenager and a young photographer growing up. This quote of his connects to me, and it would help if I put the right tab up there, wouldn't it? My apologies. This quote of his connects with me because I talk so much about creativity and about how I like to use cognitive psychology to influence what people experience from my photographs. In his quote, in my opinion, Haas is correct in that all of our experiences are influenced by other people and by other adventures and other things in our life. And we have to remember that no two people will see the world the same or have the same experience. And that applies to our photography. As photographers, we tend to forget that because we have such intimate knowledge of our experience in making the photograph, well, we forget that nobody else had that experience. As a result, their experience with our work will be much different. I mentioned I came to know about Haas in my teenage years, closer to the late 70s, and it was his color imagery that first caught my attention. Even though he was a photojournalist in a time with no Photoshop, his color images have a kind of almost hyper reality, almost dreamlike quality that was years ahead of its time. His black and white portraits, especially of celebrities and politicians, those are iconic and they're brilliant in their simplicity and emotion. So I have a link to his website in the description below the video. I encourage you, spend some time there, read his bio, study his images. And in case you don't follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or X, or LinkedIn, every day, Monday through Friday, I post a quote from a well-known photographer along with a link to allow you to learn more about that photographer and see some of their work. And just a reminder that all of you are part of a growing global community of photographers in over 100 countries who have been tuning in to watch The Last Frame every week. It would help a lot more people learn about The Last Frame if you could do me a solid, hit that thumbs up down below the video. The more thumbs up, the more YouTube recommends the show to other photographers. As our industry has shifted from film to digital photography, black and white photography's artistic integrity and timeless allure have definitely endured. A lot of people predicted that black and white was history and it would go by the wayside. On top of that, the advancements in post-processing software that have made the conversion process of taking a raw color file and turning it into a powerful black and white image has also allowed photographers to be lazy with that one-button simplicity that is intended to be only the first step in the process, not the whole entire process. So as a result, we see a lot of bad black and white images that don't need to be that bad. So in this 10-minute lesson, I want to share my black and white conversion workflow with you, right? But to start with, let's talk about what makes a great black and white image. A phenomenal black and white image is not just a desaturated color photograph. In fact, I'm a firm believer in the Ansel Adams philosophy. And this is just a quick breakdown of Ansel Adams' zone system with 11 zones going from pure black at 0 to pure white at X and all of the gray in between. If we look back throughout history at great black and white images that have stood the test of time, the overwhelming majority of them have that formula. Pure black, pure white, and all the gray in between. But if we take this a step further, I would break it down into 3 categories if I had to give you a summary of what is going to make a great black and white image. First and foremost, strong composition and subject. Great black and white photos typically have strong, well-defined subjects and compositions without the distraction of color. Elements like lines, shapes, and patterns and textures become much more pronounced, essentially demanding attention to the compositional details. Next on my list for requirements, rich tonality and contrast. Compelling black and white images exhibit a broad spectrum of gray tones, as I mentioned with Adam's zone system. Everything from deep blacks to bright whites, with a multitude of grays in between. It's this rich tonality that enhances a photograph's depth and also the dimensional feel of the photograph. Last on my list of 3, emotional impact. The best black and white images convey emotion powerfully. Whoops, I went one too far there, sorry. Powerfully using mood, atmosphere, and light to tell a story, evoke feelings, or impart a sense of time and place. So I give you those as a framework before I show you my workflow. This was a request that came in last week from Anya. Excellent request. It was a great idea. But I want to have that as a framework so that you understand how I approach it. It's very, very important before I take another step in this process of making it very clear that there are any number of ways that you can achieve great results for your black and white images. No different than there are any number of ways that you can process your color images, etc., etc. So I am going to show you 2 aspects or 2 approaches that I take. And then next week, I'll go ahead and I'll share a little bit about some of the plugins and presets that are available on the market for black and white work. So let me just switch my screen over here for you. I do most of my processing in Adobe Camera RAW, which is what you are seeing on the screen right now. Increasingly, I find myself using Luminar Neo because of its simple and, most importantly, the creativity-driven interface of Neo, which is, honestly, it's a lot of fun. But as I mentioned, the techniques that I'm about to show you, they are available in pretty much every piece of processing software that's on the market, including the free options like GIMP. Okay, so this shot that you see on the screen right now, this is the cover shot from last week's last frame cover. So you saw this last week. You saw the black and white and color, version of this. Processing this for black and white is not going to be a whole lot different than a way that I process for color. In fact, frequently, I will process an image as a color image first, and then make my conversion and tweak it. So let me walk you through that, okay? So as we go through the settings over here, right up on the top, one of the first things I can do is I could just go ahead and click the black and white button, and it's going to give me conversion. But the problem with that black and white conversion that you see now, it's a little bit flat. It doesn't have the pop and the depth that I ultimately would want from an image like this. So let's just turn that off for a second, and let's see where we would go with this from a color standpoint. So first, as I often do, I'm going to bring my highlights down, I'm going to bring my shadows up, and I'm going to pull my blacks down to get my pure black. If you've never seen me talk about this before, contrast is a slider that I almost never use. And by the way, just if you want to see the numbers, highlights are -47, shadows are +52, blacks are a -34, and not to freak you out, those numbers are ballpark for where most of my images wind up. So it's like a cooking show. When they put the seasoning on, the chef always says flavor to taste. These are not the right numbers. These are numbers that I routinely use in that range. I'm not literally watching every time to make sure I have exactly -57 or exactly +52. But the one thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to adjust the contrast slider. almost never. Capital letters on the never. Simply because contrast takes control away from me. When you use the contrast slider, you're pushing your whites and your blacks in opposite directions by the same amount. Depending on the makeup of your shot, you're going to wind up either blocking up your blacks and having no shadow detail in some areas of your image, or you're going to wind up blowing out your whites and having no detail in the whites in some areas of the image. I don't want that to happen. Working with highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks gives me much more control. Okay? So, whoops, and now that I bumped the contrast slider, let's put that back. So the last step to this, I'm probably going to lighten it ever so slight with a 0.05. Now, again, part of my normal processing, almost all of my images I add a +2. Since we're still working in color, I'm going to add a +30 on the vibrance and a +2 on the saturation. So let me blow those up and show you again. Texture, +2. Vibrance, +30. Saturation, +2. So far, you're seeing my color processing settings, right? Detail. On every image, I add 20 to whatever the default sharpness is. Depending on your camera, your default sharpness could be 25, your default sharpness could be 40, it could be 50, depending on your camera brand and model number. I add 20. My camera, in this case, came out, this was an Olympus camera, it started at 40, I've added 20, so it's now at 60. Also for the optics, remove chromatic aberration. I click as a default on every image because it doesn't hurt anything if there is no chromatic aberration, right? And profile correction. Olympus has them built in to the file, but I still click it anyway. It's just habit. That way, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. I'm always going to cover myself there. So now I've got this image pretty close to where I want it. I would potentially look at my oranges and my yellows for saturation and luminance, and I'm basically done. So now I have a sense of this is how this image should look in color. Now I'll go ahead and I will click the black and white. I still got all the same settings that I had originally dialed in, okay? And I'm going to evaluate it at this point. So the challenge that I have now is I want to go ahead and lighten my shadows just a tiny bit more because I want to see just a hint of the detail in the belt, which you can see there's a hint of the detail in the belt, okay? Because it's an overcast day, her eyes are a tad dark, so I'm going to do some quick retouching in Adobe Camera RAW, okay, before we finish this. And all that's going to be is very simply, I'm going to come to the masking tools. I am going to go ahead and open up the masking. Whoops, sorry, it was already there. That was kind of stupid of me to do that. Let's delete that. I'm going to select on her face. I didn't notice it, but it was there. Once I select that, it's going to give me the options to do facial skin, body skin, eyebrows, eye sclera, which is the whites around the eyes, iris and pupil, lips, teeth, hair, clothes. All I want is the eye sclera, the whites around the eyes, and the iris and the pupil. I'm going to mask just that. And if you look over here, you can see she's kind of got red evil eyes going on right now. That's telling you that they're masked. I am going to go ahead and I can get away with just lightness ever so slight. I don't have to. You can see we've brought just a little bit up there and that's it, right? If I lighten them too much, it's going to look really, really fake. So I'm pretty close to where I need to be. If I'm being super fussy, I'm going to create just a little bit more contrast, lighten the image ever so slight. I want to make sure that I still have detail in the sweater, which I do. I haven't lost any of that. I still have the hint of detail all through the belt. And then the last piece I'll do is crop it. And in this case, I think I'm going to go with a 1:1 crop. And let's see, we're going to put that diagonal line right down into the corner there, which makes for an interesting crop. And then the last piece, which I like to do because this kind of takes me back to my darkroom days, I am going to hit the vignette tool and drop it down kind of a fairly aggressive, like 14 or so. And that's where I'm going to finish that image, right? That's it. So do you have to do the color steps? No, you don't have to do the color steps. I would encourage you while you are learning the techniques, while you are trying to get a sense of who you are and your creative style, do the color processing, and then make the black and white conversion. The color processing will get you closer to good tonal range with the black and white once you convert it over. You're still going to make additional adjustments in black and white, but it's going to get you closer. For those of you that are just starting out with it, you're going to find yourself feeling a lot less overwhelmed if you just in fact, let's go back. And well, yeah, I don't want to zero that out yet. I'll do it on the next one. You're going to find yourself a lot less overwhelmed than if you just hit that black and white button right away and start. So this is the image. It's actually the cover image on tonight's shot. Now, you might notice this looks slightly overexposed, especially the glare that's on her forehead. This is an image. You're seeing the color raw version of it that was a studio shot. I shot this at a workshop, okay? But it was overexposed intentionally because I had my camera profile on black and white. But this is an example of an image that I'm going to process a little bit differently because I want to be able to do more retouching on it. The last image, I didn't have to do a whole lot of retouching. We go back to that really quick. Her skin's great. The lighting's flawless. There's really very little facial retouching to do. This image, I want to do more retouching. So how am I going to handle this? I am going to process this one in color. And it's already got some processing on it. I'm going to pull those highlights down a little bit more. You can see I've already put in the settings here that I've got my highlights down at 60. Shadows are up at 55, blacks are down at 30. Again, I'm always in that same range. Not the exact numbers, but that same range. I have done my texture at +2. I've pushed my clarity to +8. In a color image, especially of a female, I will almost never use clarity, but this is going to be in black and white. So I know in advance, I want that little bit of extra subtle contrast that clarity will give me. I can put it in now. It doesn't matter that I'm still in the color mode because I know that I'm going to finish in black and white. I got my vibrance at 30, saturation +2. I did my sharpening, all those settings, all the same. But now with this, when I bring this into Photoshop, and it's going to turn into a completely different picture. There you go. Now what I'm going to do to get my black and white, I want to do my retouching first. So last week I was showing you the Retouch for Me plugins. I'm going to show you 2 more of them tonight. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit that heal button. And if you watch, even the little black specks that are on her cheek right here, gone, okay? It cleans everything up super, super nicely. There's still going to be a little bit of tiny cleanup that I would want to do if I was doing this, you know, all the way through, but that's a great start. I'm going to do my dodging and burning. You'll notice some shading change as this clicks in. And you're seeing these in real time, by the way. So I do want you to understand with the Retouch for Me, these are AI plugins. So they do take a few moments to get the work done, right? It's not going to be click and instant. Obviously, the better processor, the more RAM that you have on your machine, the faster things are going to go, okay? We're going to tidy up the eye vessels here a little bit. I'm going to do all of the pieces of retouching that I normally would. Eye brilliance, this one doesn't really need. Now, that shine, still a little bit hot. I'm going to go ahead and click the mattifier plugin. But what you're going to notice is it kind of flattens the image out. And we'll let that finish. You see, it took the matte out, which is amazing, but it also really flattened it out. And I don't want it that flat. So it's really simple. All I'm going to do is grab the opacity slider down here in the layers palette, and I'm going to drag the opacity back to somewhere in mid-40s. And now I get those highlights back without them feeling blown out. Now to get my black and white image, all I'm going to do is all the way down in the bottom corner, I'm going to go ahead and add a black and white layer. You can see we're looking pretty close already right out of the box, okay? Now, we still don't have our blacks and our whites. We're a little bit kind of flat in that regard. So the next addition down here in the layers palette is going to be to add a levels layer. For those of you that love to work in curves, knock yourself out. Do this with curves. I hate curves. It's just a personal choice. There's nothing wrong with curves if that's your thing. I just find curves more challenging, right? So at this point now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull those blacks down just a bit, give the whites one last little bump, and there I have my finished black and white image with 2 layers that I've done here. So why did I do it differently this time? Because I wanted to do a lot of retouching, and I wanted to have all that retouching in place before I did the black and white conversion. That's it. It's that simple, okay? So a couple of thoughts here on this black and white shooting concept and creating a good black and white image. To create a striking black and white photograph, here's the thing you have to walk away with. It is a thoughtful and intentional process. It's not a one-button afterthought as a way to save an otherwise bad colored photo. I mean, I admitted last week that from time to time that, click the black and white and we get lucky. I'll always take a happy accident, but here's the thing. Even when you do that click to black and white to see if it's going to save a bad color picture, you still need to finish processing it in black and white. Make sure you've got those pure blacks. Make sure you've got those whites. Adjust the tones and the hues in that as necessary, which is a whole much more advanced section that we get into, but I wanted to show you my basic workflow tonight. So the short version is, remember that black and white photography, it's not about the absence of color, but it's about the celebration of visual simplicity and elegant. I feel black and white images have a certain elegance to them. It's about revealing the essence of your subject and telling a story that resonates with the viewer, drawing them in to a timeless world of lights and shadows. So honestly, whether you're a seasoned professional or an enthusiastic beginner, embracing the principles and the techniques that I've described to you kind of quickly tonight, it will help you elevate your black and white photography to new artistic heights that you have potentially not been able to find before. And what that does for you, it enables you to add to your portfolio. It enables you to add to your toolkit of things that you can create so that you can hopefully make images that are also going to have in black and white enduring beauty if you're photographing people, and emotional depth, which I think is one of the biggest things that you're going to get working with black and white. Okay. All right, so we're going to stick with our black and white conversion theme for this week's shoot breakdown. And the cover shot I mentioned already tonight, it's from a workshop that I taught for a PPA group 9 years ago this month. And I point out the date just to give you something else to think about. And that is that if you look through my work, so when we're done with the show tonight, go back to my website, joeedelman.com, and look through my portfolio. When I'm creating my fashion portraits, I work very hard and I try to make them timeless. In other words, I want to create in a way that is not easily dated. Now, it's not always possible to do that, but whenever possible, that is a goal for my work. So this particular shot, you can see this was done with a Nikon D800, shot with a 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8 zoom at about 120 millimeter, ISO 100, 1/250th of a second at f8. This is an actual behind the scenes shot from the setup. Again, this was a workshop that I did for a small PPA group in northeastern Pennsylvania. A couple of things that you can see here. Obviously, the key light, and I'm going to show you a lighting diagram in a moment, but the key light is a beauty dish with a sock on it. It is about 3.5 to 4 feet from her face. There's a white reflector on camera right, which is the model's left. You can see it behind me as I'm leaning into wrap the tool around her neck. And also, if you look towards the bottom of the stand, are you going to be able to see my mouse? Yes, you can see my mouse. If you look right in here is a fan that's mounted on a stand that is going to blow her hair back a little bit. It's going to be set at a very mild setting so that it's just pushing the hair back. You can already see how much volume we have built into her hair. Simply, the goal was to get most of the size and the volume in the hair with hairspray. And then from there, use the fan to just make sure that it stays off of her face. So the lighting setup, again, as you can see here, I did do some with the bottom piece of foam board, and I did some without. The cover shot that you are seeing does not use the foam board. It is using the fan, but a white background with one light in the back. Again, white reflector on camera right filling in, and then the beauty dish. That's the setup. One more shot from behind the scenes so you can see it. You can see, actually, you see the hairspray, the makeup artist with the hairspray. We're, working to kind of get the volume in the hair and get the shape. So that's how we created that shot. There you go. All right, my DIY tip this week, we're going to stick with our black and white theme. This is a hack that is part technique and very, very large part psychology. So if you choose to explore the genre of portrait photography, you will inevitably encounter a subject who wants you to photograph them, but they struggle with anxiety over their appearance, usually due to self-esteem issues, things like that. Also, you will inevitably encounter a subject with bad skin. And if you're fortunate, that person has a flare-up that's been exacerbated by the stress and the anxiety of getting in front of the camera. And then, as soon as you start shooting, that person will inevitably ask you if they can see some of the photos because they're worried about how they're going to look. Now, at that moment, you're aware that that person's skin is going to need quite a bit of retouching, and you're also aware that their expressions are still looking pretty stiff and awkward because you haven't been able to get them to completely relax yet. So your dilemma, if you show them a preview, you already know they're not going to like it. And if they don't like it, it's only going to make them more nervous and cause them to lose confidence in you as well as the outcome of the shoot. So how do we deal with that? Well, my preferred version is not to show previews during a portrait session, period. It's a little different if I'm doing a modeling shoot, or better yet, working with a dancer where I need to collaborate on a particular movement or like a dance move with a ballerina, because then I can show you them where they're at and they're able to make the adjustments. But with a portrait, look, I'm really focusing on the person's face and their facial expressions. In other words, emotions. But occasionally we get that really neurotic subject that's going to keep asking to see samples and just not let it go. So before I tell you the hack, I will explain that it's important that you try to figure out if your subject is nervous or insecure before you start shooting. And this is why you never pick up a camera immediately and begin firing frames. Always talk to your subject. Always put some space between, you've picked up the camera, which is a trigger, and they're starting to shoot. Give them a chance to relax. If I think that I'm dealing with one of these, I have to see my preview subjects, I will go ahead and I will set my camera's profile to black and white. Remember in the last episode, I walked you through how to do that? I want to be sure that my first few frames will be excellent high contrast black and white images, and I'm going to slightly overexpose them. By overexposing them, the result is that all the bad skin is camouflaged, and the image looks like a high-key fashion or glamour image that you would see in a magazine. Now, I know some of you think, well, that doesn't work if I shoot business portraits for a real estate agent. Oh, but yes, it does. After you shoot those 2 or 3 frames, obviously, you're not there to shoot black and white glamour images, right? But you take a look at your preview and you say, wow, that's cool. And as you go to show them, you say, look, I know this isn't what we're here for, but I forgot I have my camera set on black and white. Look at this. This looks like it's right out of a magazine. So part of it is you're selling it. This looks like it right out of a magazine, and you're excited. The other part is it kind of does, right? So I'll give you an example here. Here's a shot of a young lady who's got some skin going on, right? She's got, some pimples, some bumps, and all stuff that's easily retouched. But in order to have something to show her early on that is going to mask that, and by the way, I didn't say it takes it all away. I said mask it. So look close. When I switch to black and white, if you look close, you can still see some of the bumps, but you have to really look for them. And keep in mind, when your subject sees these, they're going to be like less than 3 inches on a screen, okay? So by doing this, your subject has seen an excellent creative image of themselves. It's going to help them relax a little bit. They're going to be a little less persistent about seeing previews, and it's going to allow you to work your way into the shoot and start producing some stuff where they look good, so that if they're going to be one of those incredibly persistent subjects, you can get some decent shots in before you've got to show them some more. So I can't guarantee you it works 100% of the time. I will tell you that for me, it works 99% of the time, but it's like any other technique. It requires a little bit of practice because number one, it requires you to really be paying attention to your subject and to figure out in advance of you picking up the camera if they are going to be this kind of nervous Nelly subject. Okay? All right. All right, last week, I showed you the Retouch for Me plugin suite that I've been using to do most, or I should say most, actually, most of my retouching work. And we ran a bit short on time, so I didn't get to show you the examples of, gosh, let's get rid of all our pop-up things here. I didn't get to show you the examples of the clean backdrop tool that they have and also the fabric tool. And these are worth taking a look at, okay? So let me switch over to the other screen here. We're gonna go back to these images. So this first image here, simple shot. This is an older picture, again, from a modeling portfolio. If you look at all of the wrinkles that are on her shirt and on the shorts, they're not horrible, but there's a lot of them. And it's one of those things that once you see them, you can't not see them. So by using the fabric plugin from Retouch for Me, one click, it's going to take a few seconds for that to think through it. And here's the cool part. Now you notice it doesn't take them away completely. In fact, if you look real quick, you can see the layer that it added there for fabric. Let me get myself out of the way, make sure that I'm not blocking that here. But I'm going to turn that off and turn it back on. Look at the difference it makes in those wrinkles. So here's the best part. What it's doing is a couple of different things. It's doing a little bit of kind of like dodging and burning and also painting to lighten those shadows. It's not taken away completely, because if you've ever tried healing or cloning out wrinkles in material that's got texture to it, you already know it almost never turns out well, right? So let's hit another one here. This shot. These wrinkles and also the wrinkles on the tops of the jeans. So I open up the plugin panel, click on fabric. It's going to take a few seconds. And again, it's not going to take them out completely, but here's before, here's after. Substantial difference. So this one, we're going to run 2 different plugins on. I'll go ahead and I'm going to hit the fabric on this one first. And you'll notice we've got we've got wrinkles in her shirt. We've got the big wrinkle here. There's some in the background. So let me show you before and after. does a great job of softening this wrinkle so that it is not as dark and stand out. Now, what I want you to see here, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna blow this up a little bit. On the background, there's a lot of white footprints that are on that background. And if you look kind of close in through here, you can see there's some black spots. Looks like my sensor was dirty for that one. This is an older shot, but you know, it's not a super clean background. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on the clean backdrop plugin from Retouch for Me. And the backdrop takes a little bit longer. This is probably the one that takes the longest out of all of them. This one and skin tone tends to take a little while, but it's going to do its thing. And now I want you to notice it's cleaned up everything in this area, and all those little white footsteps that I showed you are all gone, right? Insanely impressive stuff. So again, I told you about these last week. I showed you, the healing tool and all the others. I want to be really clear. There is a link in the description below the video. You can get 20% off of them with that link. It is an affiliate link. I'm not going to lie to you. I make a couple bucks if you purchase it. These are not inexpensive plugins. You'll notice these are the original prices. These are not your 20% off prices, but Dodge and Burn, $149, Portrait Volumes, $124, Healing Tool, $124. I will tell you, I think out of all of them, the one that's worth the most money, hands down, is the Healing Tool. Saves me so much time, right? You can try all of them for free. There is a free trial, basically like a demo version that you can try out. Don't get carried away, please, because I don't want to be responsible for that. Don't get carried away and say, hey, these are cool, and he uses them and go and buy like every single one because they're neat. Make sure you're really going to use them. Michael Kramer, great question. What would be my top 3 tool suggestions? So the disclaimer answer is, it really depends on what you shoot, Michael. But for me, the top 3 most important ones, I already mentioned. Number 1 is the Heal Tool. Number 2, Dodge and Burn. Number 3, so this is tough. Okay, I'm going to give you 4. I'm sorry. Number 3 is Portrait Volumes. But the 4th one, only because sometimes it does things for me that I just don't manage to get done well myself in the studio. And that's the Fabric one. The Fabric one just does an amazing job. But let's be clear, please. These plugins are not permission. They're not your ticket to doing sloppy work. Okay? They're not going to help you if you do sloppy work. You still need to do good work. So why do I use these plugins? I use them because they save me a tremendous amount of time. I mentioned, the Healing Tool is probably my favorite. I still, just like on the cover shot for tonight, if I was going to process that all the way through, I would still be doing a couple little pieces of the Healing Tool manually when I'm done, because there's a couple little things it doesn't pick up, but it picked up easily 98 to 99% of what I would want to have done. Okay, so again, it's one of those things where test them. You're going to find they're incredibly powerful. They're also incredibly unique. I will say, again, full disclosure, next week, I am going to show all of you some of the black and white preset tools and conversion tools like Silver Effects Pro, and also the black and white presets in Luminar. Luminar is doing a pretty impressive job with the way they process skin if you go into their portrait tools. It's not all the way to what this healing tool does yet, or this healing plugin does, but pretty impressive. So again, something for you to consider, something for you to, at least if nothing else, be aware of if you find yourself doing more of that type of work. But of all the things that are out there, again, I think I mentioned last week, I was turned on to these by my friend Unmish Thinda, who runs the Pix Imperfect channel on YouTube. Hands down, in my opinion, the best Photoshop educator that's out there. He has actually worked with this company and had input into the way that they've developed quite a few of these plugins. and they're top notch. They're absolutely amazing. So, all right, let's move on. My favorite part of the show, Q&A. It's all about solving problems. So the question is, of course, how can I help you with your photography tonight? So I'm just going to scroll back here really quick through the chat. I think I saw one or two in questions. So coast to coast imagery. I should have noticed this one while I was talking before about black and white. My apologies. His question is, does this include shooting raw black and white or just converting a raw or color image? Basically, it's both. I prefer to shoot my black and white, which we talked about last week. So if any of you missed last week's show, I encourage you to go back and watch it because it's really the beginning of the black and white conversation. But I prefer to shoot my black and white in black and white. But yeah, every now and then there are going to be those situations where after the fact, we're going to have a color image and we're going to make it black and white. But by shooting in black and white, I'm able to see, I'm able to see that I've got the image that I want in camera and that the lighting works, all that kind of stuff. Okay. Cooley, have you ever used Parapop softboxes? Cooley, I have not. No. Why? I'd love to know, Cooley, why do you think you need one? And by the way, if you answer that question, Cooley, you got to tell me what softboxes you own now, because here's the thing, gang. And I don't mean this in a nasty way, but I'm keeping it real. If you're watching this show, you don't need a Parapop softbox, okay? You just don't, okay? You need to work with the softboxes you have and the umbrellas you have, and you need to really work on your lighting. Because here's the thing. If you don't know why you need the Parapop softbox, you don't need the Parapop softbox. It's that simple. If you can't tell me what problem it's going to solve for you, you don't need the Parapop softbox, right? It is that easy, gang. I promise. Let's see here. Michael Kramer, any chance these guys are going to come up with a package of the tools? Michael, I have no idea. I don't have a direct relationship in that sense, so I really don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if this is an incredibly popular product or, I mean, they've been around for a while, but I just know that for my workflow, these tools have saved me incredible amounts of time. So I mean, not every tool is going to fit every photographer's workflow. And retouching, believe me, is a very, it's kind of a very personal process in terms of, because it has a big impact on the finished feel of your images, right? So there are a million different ways to retouch an image and a million different degrees to which you can and or should retouch an image. So a big part of what I really like about this tool is the simplicity that it's creating these layers that if I feel it's overdone it a little bit, like for example, eye vessels, the whites around the eyes, the sclera. In my opinion, it routinely over whitens them a little bit. So the best part of it is all I have to do is grab the opacity slider and just pull the opacity down a little bit, problem solved, right? So I like the fact that it's that easy to be able to make the adjustments and clean things up. So let's see here, scrolling down. From Joe Doozle, which online gallery do you use? Joe, if you're talking about just showing off pictures for the sake of showing off pictures, I happen to use SlickPick at this point. I've talked about SlickPick quite a bit. It's slickpick.com, SLICKPIC.com. I'll add a link in the description after the show. Their gallery setup is super simple, really easy to manage. You've all heard me talk about photographing the pictures of my grandson playing baseball. I photograph his whole team when they're playing, and I give the parents the images. So after a game, the pictures for my son and daughter-in-law of my grandson, they go in a Dropbox and they do their thing with it. But all the pictures of the rest of the kids, I load them into a SlickPick gallery, and I just keep building that gallery through the whole season. And I have it set up so people can download the full resolution file. You don't have to let them do that. You can, set it any way you want. SlickPick, however, Joe, does not have any e-commerce capabilities in yet. So if you're looking to sell digital downloads or printing, SlickPic's not going to be your answer. If you are looking to be able to sell images, then I would encourage you to do something like SmugMug, PixieZet, Zenfolio. Joe, I see you mentioned ShootProof. I've never used ShootProof. I'm not super familiar with it other than its existence. But what I would encourage you, most of those platforms do have a free trial. So it's worth spending a couple of hours if you're looking to do something where you're going to want to make some money, and do your research. Set up a free trial for each one of them, literally. You're looking to get a sense of which one is going to allow you to do the things that you need or want to do. You're also looking to get a sense of which one's easiest, which one do you understand. I'm one of those crazy people. Whenever I get a new piece of software, I refuse to read the directions at first. Okay? Don't worry. My whole thing about reading camera manuals, I'm big on that. But I actually do the same thing with cameras too, because I've been shooting for a long time. When I get them, I'm going to pick them up and I'm going to start using them. And I want to figure out simply how intuitive is it. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to read the manual, read the directions, all of that kind of stuff to solve whatever problems I've run into. And by that time, I'm looking at, okay, as I'm reading these directions or these solutions to whatever issues I found in the software, how easy is it? Or is reading these directions making it even harder, in which case I'm not going to be working with that piece of software, right? But a big priority to me when I first test out something like that is just how intuitive is it? How much can I get done of what I want done without having to waste a lot of time and without having to go through all the documentation? So it's not that I won't do the documentation, but I just want to see how intuitive have they made it. So yeah, I would advise you spend some time, do the free trials, and see which one is going to work out best for you. But the only ones I've had experience with have been PixieZet, Zenfolio, and SmugMug, and they all work great. Out of the three of them, SmugMug is kind of I think my favorite of the group. But there are many, many, many photographers very successfully using the other two. So let's see, spinning wheels. Can the black and white processing be done the same in Lightroom? Exactly the same. What you saw me do tonight was in Camera RAW, Adobe Camera RAW, which is the same piece of software that runs the develop panel in your Lightroom. Literally, Lightroom and Photoshop share a plugin that's called ACR, Adobe Camera RAW plugin. So if you're a Windows or Mac user, whichever, if you go into your system files and you find the Camera RAW plugin and just rename it for the fun of it, Lightroom or Photoshop will not launch. Neither one of them will launch because they can't find the proper plugin, right? Name it back to Camera RAW plugin and they both launch. So they both share it. I don't know why Adobe does it that way, because obviously the Camera RAW plugin that you saw me working in is a whole separate interface and it looks different than the develop panel in Lightroom, which is kind of dumb. But it's exactly the same settings, exactly by the same amount. So if you do something plus 10 in Lightroom, it's exactly the same as doing plus 10 in Photoshop. There's no difference because they're being powered by Adobe Camera RAW, or you'll oftentimes see it referred to as ACR, which is the letters for Adobe Camera RAW. Okay? All right, gang, we are out of time. Thank you for watching. I hope that you found some value in what I shared with you tonight. Next week, more cool stuff. We're going to continue the black and white discussion. I've already mentioned this a couple times. I'm going to show you how you can use plugins like Silver Effects Pro from Nick, or even the Luminar presets to further enhance your black and white images. I'll have another shoot breakdown, the last frame Q&A, and some more stuff. If you can't make it to the live show, but you have questions or things that you need help with, leave your question in the comments below the video, and I'll answer it next week. In fact, it may be, just like last week, it may become the topic of the next last frame. And hey, listen, if you still need to do so, hitting a thumbs up helps more photographers find out about the show. Remember, folks, you don't get back the days you waste. So please go pick up that camera and shoot something. Because your best shot, it's your next shot. Hashtag do the work. Adios, gang.